Golden State Media Concepts bring you Book Review Podcast, a haven for bookworms of all ages and the widest genres, from mystery to memoirs, romance to comedy, fantasy to sci-fi. If you love to read, this is a podcast for you. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast.
Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast. I am your host, Sarah, and once again, I am excited to bring you another author interview. I say it every week, but I love doing them. So if you get tired of hearing me say that, I do apologize, but I love reading the books and talking to the authors and getting to know people, and it's so much fun. I can't even tell you how much I love it. So this week I am speaking with Marianne Delacourt, author of the Tara Sharp series. If that name sounds familiar to you, it should. She has been on the podcast before, and she is so much fun to talk with. She is so much fun to read. The Tara Sharp series is excellent escapist reading. It's wonderful. It is funny. It is smart. It's got great characters. And so if you want to tune into the first interview with Marianne, that was episode 10 on April 6th of 2017. So you can check that out. We talked about the third book in the Tara Sharp series in that interview. In today's interview, we'll be talking about the fourth book in that series. And that book is called Sharp Edge. It is the continuation, of course, of Tara's story, and things are continuing to get very, very interesting in Tara's life. So here is the description from Marianne's website. That's www.mariannedepierre.com, and she writes under both Marianne Delacourt and Marianne Depierre. She talks about that some in the interview. Anyway, Sharp Edge is book 4 of the Tara Sharp series, and the description is as follows. Garth Wilmot, Tara's ex-boyfriend and current accountant, has found someone is cooking the books at Chic Fashion House where his new girlfriend works. When his life is threatened if he doesn't turn a blind eye, he goes to Tara for advice. Tara learns that gang lord Johnny Viaspa is involved. Helping Garth could be dangerous to her health. And then there's the equally pressing matter of the favor she owes a local bikie group. It seems they're intent on calling it in right now. So, as with all the Tara Sharp books, you get humor, you get adventure, you get mystery, and Tara is one of those characters that finds herself in these crazy situations. If you have read the first 3 or any of the first 3, you know that she has run up against a crime lord named Johnny Viaspa, and he does not like Tara. He would like to eliminate her if at all possible. She, in the last book, ended up encountering someone from a biker gang who did her a favor, so now she owes the bike gang a favor, and that comes into play in this book. She still has the love triangle going on between the two amazing men in her life, Ed and Tazi, so she's still trying to figure that out. She lives in her parents' garage, although in this book she does get to finally move out of the garage, and she is the kind of accidental mentor and substitute mom kind of for a 16-year-old that she encountered in the first book, who kind of adopted Tara. And so she has all of these various things going on in her life, and she's so much fun. She does get herself involved in some crazy situations, but she manages to extricate herself and everything is developing as the books go on. So I love them. I think they're a lot of fun. They remind me, as I said, a little bit of the Stephanie Plum series. If you've heard of that one and you like it, then you should definitely pick up Tara Sharp, because it's a little bit like Stephanie Plum, just in Australia. And of course, there's some other differences as well, but enough similarities that if you like Janet Ivanovich's Stephanie Plum series, you would definitely like Tara Sharp. So I'm going to get to the interview and let Marianne talk about her work rather than having me tell you about it. So here is my interview with Marianne Delacourt about Sharp Edge, the fourth book in the Tara Sharp series. Hi, Marianne. Welcome back to the podcast. It's wonderful to talk to you again. How are you?
Oh, look, thank you for having me back, and I'm really well, actually. It's sunny here in Brisbane, Australia.
Good.
Sunday afternoon.
Very good. And we are here to talk about the new Tara Sharp book, the fourth in the series. Sharp Edge.
Yes.
What do you want to tell us about that?
I think probably the best of the Tara books to date, so I'm pretty happy with it. I feel like the characters are really developing nicely, and there's some shift in things. Tara finally gets to move out of home, and her love life is as complicated as always, and the stakes are getting higher and higher. From the last book, she owed a big favour to a bikie gang, and now she's having to come good and do a favour for them, which gets her into lots of trouble.
Yes. And she is, as you said, she is developing as a character. She is moving forward with some of her investigative practices, but she also still manages to get herself into all kinds of crazy situations.
Yeah.
How has it been? How was writing this book for you? Was it any different from writing the first three?
Look, I think every Tara Sharp novel I write, I get more comfortable with the characters. I see their trajectories better. Like, it's just kind of, it's like putting on a glove. It's comfortable, and I kind of, I can see how their lives are panning out. It's actually quite fun. It's like, having friends, I guess. It's like seeing what your friends are doing over a period of years. I was very conscious of, when I set out to write this series, that the characters did change and grow. And, Tara can be a bit flaky at times and get herself into situations, but I want to see a maturing process for her too. And I think that's starting to happen in this book.
Yeah. Well, in terms of her relationship, even with Cass, who is the teenage character, she really has to start taking on a little more responsibility. And
absolutely,
I think they're both growing.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's an interesting relationship, that one, because Cass is not that much younger than Tara, but for the first time in her life, Tara's actually got to start thinking about someone other than herself.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah, and Cass in some ways is mothering her back, and so I really like the dynamic between them. It's been a lot of fun to write.
Yeah, I agree. And you mentioned last time when we spoke that you do have kind of an end date in mind, for not end date, but a point in the story that you want to go with. So what's next for Tara that you can tell us about without giving too much away?
To tell you the truth, I haven't sat down and kind of really nutted out a plot yet. But certainly in terms of her personal growth, in terms of her business, I think that you'll see the business starting to take off in a bit more of a professional capacity. It'll be less of a backroom kind of affair, and may even have some, she may even start employing some people and things like that. So I don't ever want to lose the quirkiness of it and the quirky characters, but I think, if she's ever going to be a success, then she needs to sort of start making inroads into a career of it. But as that happens, of course, the goalposts change, and I think, Cass as a character is going to come very much into her own over the next few years. So, it was actually really interesting. I'll just tell you a little anecdote. I was on the flight going back to Perth recently, and I happened to sit next to this fellow, and he started talking to me because he saw I was reading a crime book. And it turned out, without giving too much away, that he is a guy who was actually quite involved in the criminal scene in Perth years ago, and moved away and has kind of gotten out of the business. And in that brief conversation we had, so many of the kind of generalised things he told me were the things that I was writing about in the story. It actually gave me goosebumps.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I'd known this guy by reputation. I remember hearing his name mentioned and things like that. And in this last book, we look at the methamphetamine. In Sharp Edge, I look at the methamphetamine trade in Perth, and he talked to me quite a bit about that, and it was really quite spooky. It was like, so he said if I ever wanted to talk about things, to give him a call. So you never know, I might have an insider story there.
That's amazing. I mean, what are the odds that that's the person you're going to sit next to on a plane?
unbelievable. And the fact that he saw I was reading a crime book kind of sparked this conversation. I mean, I think it's all well in his rearview mirror, so he felt comfortable to kind of share a few tidbits with me. But yeah, it was incredible, and he talked about things about Perth in general as a city, in the sense of, you know, sort of the criminal elements of Perth that really, really fitted with what I had set up in the books. So,
wow,
amazing.
Yeah, that is amazing, and I know I already said that's amazing, but that's that is. Seriously, what are the odds of sitting next to that person on an airplane? I think that story is really great. I love just the coincidence of sitting next to him and the fact that he struck up a conversation with her, and then that he was so willing to offer, you know, stories and tell her things from his life that really influences or might influence some of her work going forward. So we are going to talk more about this new Tara Sharp book and all of Marianne's work, but we do have to take our first break of the podcast, so stay tuned, and I will be right back with Marianne Delacourt.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now, don't bother, what's hot on Netflix, and everything in between. That's gsmcpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast. Let's get right back into that interview with Marianne Delacourt about her new book, Sharp Edge. And, you know, I asked about your trajectory for Tara, but this book is just coming out. So do you want to tell us when it comes out? Because that's next week, right?
Yeah, 26th of October. I think there's been quite a few pre-sales, so I'm pretty excited about that. I've also heard we've got a BookBub deal for book 2 coming up. I think I'm allowed to say that. So our BookBub for the first book, Sharpshooter, was really successful. So people can look forward to getting the second book for free and the first book for a discounted price as we lead into the fourth book coming out. So I'm really hoping that will spread the word about the series, because I think overall it's getting a really good response. Even, you know, I was a little bit worried that international readers would find the humour a little bit Australian, or the setting a bit too Australian. But for the most part, I think people are finding it nice and different. You know, it's an enjoyable change, you know. I mean, there are, like we discussed, there are a few words that...
Yes.
Like whippersnipper and weed whacker.
Yes.
That are different.
I read that and I was going to Google it, and then I just thought, I'm going to ask Marianne and she can tell me what it is.
But, yeah. I mean, that's a bit of the fun of it. So, so October 26th, pre-order now through Amazon or any of your online bookstores, Apple, or you can go to the 12th Planet Press website and do it through there as well. And we've got a few kind of reviews, and I'll be blogging a little bit around that time.
Okay, wonderful. And, you know, back to the whether it's Australian or not, I mean, it is, and I like that. I love... because there's some similarities to reading British authors as well, because, you know, the boot and the bonnet in terms of the car talk. So It's kind of fun to get those different words that just... It definitely makes sure, at least for me, that I'm paying attention, because I'll come across a word that doesn't just naturally flow in my own way of speaking. But yeah, whippersnipper, I like that.
Pavement and sidewalk are two that often, we talk about the pavement.
Yes.
What's the other one you said to me?
Oh, well, I hadn't heard of green ants. They sound horrible.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
I did Google those. They're nasty looking.
They're not particularly big, but they have an afterburn that can last for a couple of days. Yeah, it's pretty. We have a lot of bities out here in Australia.
Yes.
spiders and ants and snakes and
yes, yeah. And then the other thing that I notice is curb. We spell it C-U-R-B and you spell it K-E-R-B, which, it's the same word, just a different spelling.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. There's so it's entertaining anyway. If anything, you can get your Aussie dictionary and set it next to the
That's right.
next to the book.
That's right. So if I ever make it to Australia, I'll have at least a few words that I know.
You will. You'll know how to ask how to borrow a whippersnipper.
That's right. I'm sure it'll come up. So what are you working on right now? Anything?
Yeah, I've literally just written the end to my PhD novel, which I'm doing for my creative writing PhD.
Oh, congratulations.
Which is a feminist time travel novel, which I'm quite excited about.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm halfway through a teen novel about getting basketball scholarships to college from Australian players coming over to play college basketball. So it's kind of like One Tree Hill, but with Australians. And then I'll probably start work on the next Tara Sharp novel, I think. So,
oh, fun.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I'm very aware of is the unending love triangle, and I'm going to be doing some interesting things with that in the next couple of books, because there becomes a point when the readers become frustrated with, something not happening, and I've found that in other series, and I feel that even if things change over time, something must happen in one direction or the other.
Mm-hmm. Do you have people often with love triangles? There's social media presence where people are, team one person or team. Do you have Team Tazi and Team Ed?
Yes, Team Tazi and Team Ed has recently started up, I think. But one of my friends who's polyamorous suggested that she could love them all and they could all love her. And I thought, well,
love
that's
wins.
Maybe I'll go that way.
I don't know. They're both pretty strong characters. They might have their own opinions on that one.
Yes, that's true.
Although I would like to...
I'll let them decide. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say I'll let them decide.
I was going to say I would love to see Nick's mom's reaction to that one.
Yes, Irene Tozzi's a bit old school.
Yeah. Even if you don't do that, would you just write me that scene? So you just finished your PhD, female time travel, and will that be published so that the public can read it, or is it just part of your? How does that work exactly?
I hope so. It's just gone to my agent now, so we might be a little bit late getting it out to publishers this year. Usually by November they've packed up for the year, but it'll definitely go out to publishers early next year. So I'm hopeful. That somebody will want to publish it. So, stay tuned on that one. I think that it's a kind of very timely novel, and I think it's relevant to a lot of stuff that's been shown in movies and TV at the moment. So hopefully there'll be a market for it, yeah. The first half of the book is set in the future, and the second half is set in 1429. So it's an interesting mixture of a book. Yeah, I've never written anything like this before, so it's been fun.
Yeah, so a lot of research for kind of historical.
Yeah, in fact, I had a research trip to France last year and followed Joan of Arc's trail around, because it's very much around her story.
Oh, fun!
Well, the first part of her story, when she's before she goes to Orleans and has her first big win. So it's about changing the course of history for the betterment of women, basically. And so yeah, we'll see. Hopefully somebody enjoys it and wants to publish it.
Yeah, and because you've got the different pen names, which name would you publish that under, do you think?
Being science fiction, it'll be under Marianne Delacourt.
Mm-hmm.
The teen novel, I'm not sure. I'm hopeful. I think I've had feedback that that's a fairly the kind of novel that publishers would be looking for. So I'm fairly hopeful once I finish that will be published. And maybe I'll publish that under Marianne Delacourt. I'm not sure yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in terms of your science fiction, is there anything that you want to, kind of push out there that we might not have heard about, or because that's Marianne Delacourt, so
yeah. Well, just go to my website. I have a number of different kinds of series that I've written under Marianne Delacourt. I have a traditional space opera. I have a crazy urban fantasy mashup, which is a murder mystery, a western, urban fantasy, romance, all mixed into one. Oh, and that's called the Peacemaker series, and that's a lot of fun, very easy to read. My first series, Nolan Angels, a cyberpunk series, and I have a teen series that's actually kind of a dark fantasy, but it's science fiction underneath. So there's a whole variety of stuff out there for whatever kind of tastes you have. I usually write what I'm interested at the time in, and that's, that changes all the time too. So I tend to write in different subgenres.
Right. I love that, though, because it draws in more people to hear about you, and then they might read something that they hadn't thought about reading before. Maybe they're science fiction fans, but then they read the Tara Sharp books.
I hope so. I mean, certainly for me, it keeps me interested in what I'm doing. I don't want to write the same thing year in, year out. I want to try different things. So, mind you, having said that, I have really enjoyed writing a Tara Sharp novel. Is always a joy because I get to sit and giggle all day.
Yes. I was reading it on the train going to work the other day, and I don't even remember what it was, but it made me snort, and the woman next to me looked at me like I had lost my mind.
I can remember the day in book 3 I wrote the scene where the barbecue duck fell on her head when she was spying on someone, and then she had to take it and stick it in her handbag. She had to buy it. Yes. And I can remember just sitting there crying with laughter to myself, thinking, this is really crazy.
Yes. I love it, though.
I'm glad no one could see me.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's always good. It's not like me sitting on the train snorting and laughing out loud. But and now you know that I should never be let out in public with a book, because I can't be trusted to not let every emotion that I'm feeling show on my face, or have me just snorting or laughing or even sometimes commenting out loud on whatever I'm reading. If you're like that, please let me know, because I would love to know that I'm not alone in my public embarrassment of my publicly embarrassing reading. We do have to take our second break of the podcast, but stay tuned and we will be back with the conclusion of my interview with Marianne Delacourt.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast. Here we have the conclusion to my interview with author Marianne Delacourt. What else? What else do you want to talk about? Anything that we haven't talked about that you want to cover?
I'm probably the only other major thing I'm working on at the moment is I've been developing a podcast series, which is called I Can't Tell You ... and it's about people who've lived with long-term secrets or have had secret lives, and each episode is an exploration of that secret. Not so much the secret but how the secret has affected their lives, you know, and the people around them. So I'm doing that with support from Screen Queensland, and hopefully pitching that to some producers towards the end of the year. So it'll be 6 episodes. At the moment I have 4 stories for it. I'm still looking for the last 2. So if any of your listeners have a secret, that it's not exclusive to Australia, but it needs to be someone who's prepared to speak on tape but anonymously. They don't have to say who they are, but I need to be able to interview the people.
Right.
So that's been an interesting project because it's kind of semi-journalistic, but it speaks very much to my insatiable curiosity about people and their lives.
Yeah, that sounds really fascinating. And so when do you have any kind of time frame for when the first episode might be out?
Well, I mean, I haven't. It's just in the pitching stage at the moment, so there's certainly a long way to go. But I had the great good fortune of having doing a workshop with Brian Reed from S-Town, the S-Town podcast, from This American Life and Serial. Mm-hmm. And he happened to be in Australia doing a speaking tour, and that was just a wonderful experience, and really spurred me on to try and develop that side of my skill base.
Wonderful.
So, yeah, and I'm working with an independent musician on it, called a lady called Yunyu, who lives in Sydney, Australia, and she'll probably be doing some of the music grabs for me for it. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's fun.
Okay.
Fun
so can people learn more about that on your website? Or?
Yeah, there's actually a call out on my website for stories. So if you just go to my website and look through the last couple of blog posts, you'll find it fairly easily.
Okay. And do you want to give us your website so we know?
Yeah, it's www.mariannedepierre, all one word, .com. If you Google something that sounds like Marianne Depierre, you'll probably find it.
Okay.
Or just Google Tara Sharp or something along those lines, and you'll find me. All the Tara Sharp website leads back to the main website.
Right.
So.
Okay. And I think even if you go to your author page on Amazon, it should take you to your website.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, please, I'd also love to hear from readers, anyone who reads the 4th Tara Sharp novel, how they found it. So,
where else on social media can people find you?
So Facebook under Marianne Depierre, Twitter under M Depierre, I think. Instagram, you name it, I'm there. Google Plus.
Okay.
Probably tend to use Twitter and Facebook the most. Instagram's probably a bit more of a personal Instagram, so it'll probably bore most people. But lots of pictures of flowers when I go for walks.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, just all the usual suspects. I do have a YouTube channel that's not updated terribly regularly these days, and I come in and out of a few of the other ones, but yeah. There is a Marianne Depierre fan page on Facebook, but I also have a personal page there as well, so I accept on either of those.
Okay. You are sitting in front of a corner, 2 walls full of books, which just makes me want to come hang out in your library.
Yeah.
So are you reading anything right now, or are you too busy?
Well, always reading. I'm actually reading that crime novel that I mentioned on the plane, which is about a crime kingpin from... It's actually an autobiography of a crime kingpin from Sydney in the 80s and 90s, really. He's kind of, getting a bit older now. So that's... And then I've just been reading oodles and oodles of stories about... I've read every story ever written about Joan of Arc, I think.
Okay, right.
I'm actually finding more and more that I'm reading less fiction and more non-fiction. I find probably the other book that I really enjoyed recently, which might be something harder to get if you're out of Australia, but it's... there was a famous movie in Australia called Picnic at Hanging Rock. I think it came out in the 70s. And it's about a place called Hanging Rock where some schoolgirls disappeared. And it's a very spooky, kind of mystical, weird place. out in the Victorian bush. The book was written, it was a fiction book written by a writer called Joan Lindsay, and the book I read about her was semi-biographical and semi about the film. Beautifully written, beautiful book, beautiful hardcover. I can't recall the name of it right off, but it also kind of covered the art and writing scene in Victoria at that time, which was in the 1800s, and it was beautiful. I really enjoyed that. So yeah. So that's a bit, yeah. If I'm not reading I'm also marking 1,000 research projects for university students because I tutor a lot. So yeah. So I'm doing most of my reading at the moment is other people's work.
Yeah, that would be a project.
Yeah.
I jumping around a little bit here, but you were talking earlier about your science fiction stuff, and so. Explain space opera, just for people who may not have heard that term before.
Yeah. How do you explain space opera? So it's usually big canvas adventures in space.
Okay.
So when I say big canvas, I mean it usually encompasses many worlds and space and time travel, and it's kind of I guess it's a play on soap opera.
Okay.
But it started off being very much boys' adventures in space, and then in about the 90s, that began to change, and so it's much more character-driven now, and there's also more women writing in space opera. So that series is a 4-book series, and it's a very, very broad canvas story, about set in the constellation of Orion.
Oh, fine. Okay. So thank you. I mean, I've heard the phrase before, but I just thought maybe some people might be curious as to what space opera referred to, because I doubt it's opera in space.
There's probably occasionally that as well.
Probably. Thank you. It was really, really good to talk to you again. I love talking to you. It's so much fun. Anything else that you wanted to throw out there before we wrap it up?
Well, I'd like to thank you too, Sarah. It's wonderful. Always enjoy coming on your podcast and seeing your smiling face.
Yes, this time we had the video working, so.
Not really. Just look out for the next book and look out for the book Bub on Sharp Turn, because if you're new to the series, you can dip in there. They're very easy to read independently. Mm-hmm. So you can start at a second or a third book, but obviously, like any series, you see the character development if you read all of them.
I actually read them 3, 1, 2, because I read the third one for our last conversation, and then it worked fine.
Well, there you go. So you're a classic example.
Yep.
So yeah, please get out and support this great Aussie character. She's a lot of fun, and I hope you have a lot of fun reading her, and hopefully we'll get to chat again with Tara Sharp Book 5.
I would love it. That would be great. So thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks. Once again, I want to thank my guest, author Marianne Delacourt. I always love talking to Marianne. She's just so much fun, and she's got such a great sense of humor, and she's a really talented writer. So thank you again, Marianne, for being a repeat guest on the podcast. I can't tell you how much that means to me, that you would come back and talk with me again. It's been wonderful. So the book, as I said, hopefully enough times you've remembered, is Too Sharp. Excuse me, see? Now I just got it wrong. It's Sharp Edge. The 4th of the Tara Sharp series. As Marianne said, you can start with this book or with one of the others, but I would say even if you do start with one of the later books, go back and read the rest, because you really get to see how the characters develop, how the story is developing, how things are evolving through this series. And they're all a lot of fun. So even if you start with one of the later books, you should go back and pick up the first ones, because they're so much fun to read. So once again, thank you to my guest, Marianne Delacourt. Thank you to you who are listening. I always appreciate you. And I know that I don't get to actually see you, but you are out there, and I love you as my listeners, and I love that you tune in. Tune in again next week when I will be interviewing author Katie Proctor about her book, Meet Me Under the Stars. And if you've ever worked as a camp counselor, you will love this book, because there's a lot of references to working as a camp counselor, working at a summer camp. So that's next week, author K.D. Proctor. In the meantime, you can find all of our our podcasts at www.gsmcpodcast.com. You can download those podcasts on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, anywhere, anything that you use for your mobile device, any of those apps, you can download the podcasts. And you can find us on social media, GSMC_book review on Twitter and Instagram. We're also on Facebook and Tumblr. I would love to hear from you. I know my authors would love to hear from you, what you think about the interviews, what you think about their works. So even if you don't comment on our social media pages, please go and tell your favorite authors that you love their works, because I know they appreciate hearing that. As always, thank you so much for joining me. Please join me again next week. In the meantime, though, go out there and get yourself lost in a good book. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.